Mrs. Castaneda, Dr. Castaneda, thanks for allowing me to visit with the two of you in San Antonio. Dr. Castaneda, how in the world did your friendship with my father last from 6th grade? Explain that dynamic.
We were in Lamar Middle School, 7th grade. We were in history class with Mr. Sanchez, and he sat behind me in class, and this bully, Pollo, came by, took my pencil, and he went down the road. And I started to get up, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I turned, it was Joe. And he said, it's not worth it. And so I sat back down, and he gave me his pencil. And I thought, my God, he's right, it's not worth it. I'm gonna go beat this guy, and he's never gonna leave me alone. And after that, we were friends. We were friends forever, and we had lunch together. We sat outside facing the football field, and we had our little bags, the sandwiches, and since then we've been together. We went to Warren High, and then we met two other friends over there, Raul and Aniba, and we would just do everything together. Go to the gym, have lunch, go out to parties
okay, that's all right. We weren't going steady yet.
And drink beer. One of our friends had a car, and he was taller and older, so confidential, right? We were able to go to this drive-in place, and we knew the waiter there, so we would order beer, and we would be drinking beer in the car, right? Maybe just one beer, right? And so that's how I met him. Our last day as a senior, we were all going off to college that weekend, and Friday night we went to a sock hop, and we were there in the gym, the four of us. We were on the north side, and I saw her on the south side, and I had met her before. She came into the room where I was doing the science project. She was looking for the teacher there, and I had just seen her. I had never seen her before, but from then on I ran into her all the time, and so. I'm looking, and Joe was on my left side. He turns around and he said, "You want to ask her to dance, right?" Yeah. We'll go. No. Well, what if she says no? Well, you won't find out until you go. And so I started walking across the room, and next to her was a girl that I already knew. And I said, if I chicken out, I'll just ask the girl next to her. And so I finally got the courage. I asked her, "Would you like to dance?" And she said yes. And then I introduced myself. I'm so. He goes, "Yes, I know." I said, "Wow." And the next Sunday, we all went up to college. We all went up to college. I stayed at a dorm called Moore Hill Hall, and it happened to be the dorm for the athletes. And Thanksgiving, I got a letter because we didn't have any phones, so it was a letter. I got a letter from Joe saying, "I'm going down to Laredo. You want to go with me?" He said, "Do you have a car?" "No, I'm going to hitchhike." "Oh, okay." So he walks into my dorm. I told the roommate. He walks into my dorm in his uniform, with his
the cadet uniform.
Cadet uniform. Yeah. He was in the Corps, and I said, "Oh my God, walking into an Aggie uniform into a uniform dorm." Yeah.
That's bold.
And so we got our little suitcases, because we didn't have backpacks or anything like that. And so we walked to, the interstate was about 2 blocks from the dorm, and we were picked up right away, because he was in the uniform. We got picked up right away. We had no problems at all getting picked up. And we did that. We did that several times from Laredo to
So Joe was your free ride.
Yeah, Leo, Joe, do you have your uniform? Yes, I do. So, they left me in Austin, and then he went up to UT.
Super. Tell me about those times. This is Laredo in the 50s. Was it a challenging time here in Laredo? Were there difficulties in terms of society and so forth?
No, not for us. Not for us. But our class was mainly Latino. Right? We had maybe a couple of Anglo friends, but no. Everywhere you went, it was mainly Latinos. We had no problems at all. We used to even go across the river back then, when you could, to the restaurants and to the bars there, and no problems at all. Yeah. And like I tell you, we had that friend Raul that had a car, so we would get around. We would go. He would pick me up first. He already had an email with him because he lived close. He would pick me up, and then we would go pick up Joe over there by Zacate Creek. I remember Farragut Street. Yeah.
Talking about Farragut Street, that is where my Solis grandparents lived. Did you have any contact with my grandparents that you can recall?
No.
Okay.
When we go up, Joe was already outside.
Ah.
And when we dropped him off, he just went inside. So I met Neto because we would go to where he was working. I met Luz. I met Rene también, but I didn't meet any of the other people.
Do you recall him talking about his childhood,
No.
his family life?
No.
Now, you said a few minutes ago in the car that he was a very quiet person.
Yeah.
Where do you think that came from? Was he just naturally shy?
Yeah, he was very naturally shy. He wouldn't talk unless como decían, tienes que sacarle las palabras, ¿verdad? He wouldn't talk. He would nod, just like that time that I tell you. All he said was, "It's not worth it," and that was it. He didn't go into explanation, but I knew exactly what he meant. And that's how he was. That's how he was. Very quiet, very reserved, super intelligent, and he. None of his family had gone to college, and he wanted to go to college, and I wanted him to go with me to UT, and I don't think his parents wanted him to go to college, because he mentioned one time, very quietly, he said, I'd like to go to college, but I don't know about what my family's going to think. But then he got a 4-year scholarship, because he was a valedictorian. He's got a 4-year scholarship to A&M. And I asked him, Joe, what's going to happen? No, I'm going.
Wow.
So he was resolved, and he went. He went to college. Le fue muy bien allá.
Super.
Yeah.
Mrs. Castaneda, what are your earliest recollections of the friendship between Dr. Castaneda and my father?
That would have been in high school. And I'd like to make a correction that we are in Laredo, not in San Antonio for this interview.
Okay. Did
You
I say
calm
San
down.
Antonio?
Yes, you did. That's all right. That's all right. And we're very, very happy that you came down and made us a part of this, which is something that is very, very touching. And we loved Joe very much. We loved your mom. We love your mom very much. And my first recollection of Joe is probably immediately after Pete and I started being a twosome. At the beginning, so they were seniors. They graduated in 1961. I was a sophomore. So I was a lowly sophomore. And I just knew by name the big shots in school. And so your dad, Pete, and there were your friends who were like, they would get very good grades in school, and they were involved in this organization and this other organization, and they were, some of them were more popular than others, but I remember Joe always being with Pete, okay? Now, our courtship, so I guess I have to thank your father for urging him to come and ask me to dance.
Nice.
Okay, so the rest is history. We have been married for 58 years already.
Beautiful.
So, anyway, when he started courting me, it started by letter, because again, there were no phones, and even no cell phones, nothing like that. So he wrote me, I wrote him back, and that Thanksgiving he came down, and I think all the guys came down and got together in Laredo. They each came from their college places, and there was a dance. Back then we had a lot of dances, like Texas A&I, Kingsville would have a Laredo Kingsville alumni dance, and then UT would have one as well during Christmas, and the guys would bring, including your dad, would bring their dates, and we'd all sit at the same table. There was no drinking. This was at the gym at Martin High School, and with live bands, and then we started exchanging letters back and forth. And during the summers, when Pete was not taking summer school, and I suppose your father was not, but we lived, my family, I'm Garcia, we lived on the corner, we lived at 2620 Elm Street, right on the corner with Louisiana Street, which is close to Nixon, the Nixon area, which was not populated back then. It was just getting, houses were starting to be built. But anyway, Pete would borrow, one of the ways that he would court me, and your dad was always with him, is that he would borrow his father's white Chevy pickup truck, and he would go drive round the block and around Elm Street and around the back street and come down Louisiana. And my sister and I had the bedroom right at the corner of Elm and Louisiana. And my little brothers and sisters, I had, they kind of knew that I had already been in contact with him. And they would run from the door, "I've been at Pete, I've been at Pete." But the first one that I would see, and our bedroom had a window facing Louisiana Street and another big window facing Elm Street. So they would let me know that he'd already gone by Elm Street, and so then I would run to my bedroom if I was not in the bedroom, I was doing something else. This was in the afternoons during the summer, and even during the winter, but it was more, I remember, during the summer. And the first one that I would see, of course, was your dad, because he was the passenger. Okay? And there they go. And and they would, I don't know how many times they'd run around the block, but around the manzana, And so that's when I started getting to know him. And then, of course, when we would get together for dates to the big dances, that was very, very enjoyable times. And that's how we would have the opportunities to socialize, really. And it was all in good fun. There wasn't any drinking. Well, it wasn't allowed back then. But, and then I became, I think, his friend as well, with your dad.
Nice.
He was very, very quiet. I knew he was the smartest person in the class. And
But he didn't show it.
he never boasted about it. He didn't, you would think that, he was not that type of a guy who would be a high achiever, because he was not he didn't act like a go-getter like this, or I'm here in this organization, or I got the highest grade in calculus. No, y'all, they didn't teach calculus back then. Trig was the highest math we got at Martin High School back then. But I became his friend as well. And then later on, when he and your mom got married, we became very, very close friends when they lived here in Laredo. We never left Laredo. And we would get together with other couple friends who had already been married as part of the group. Actually, it was part of the same high school group.
Wow.
Most of the time.
Fabulous.
Most of the time. And then, of course, Martin High School class of 61 was very active with their class reunions. And Joe and Laura would come from San Antonio. When they lived in Laredo, of course, they would be there.
Right.
But they would come from San Antonio, and we would all sit together, and it was time to reminisce, and it was a beautiful time for us to, touch base with it again. But it was as if we had just seen each other yesterday, even if we hadn't, talked to each other or seen each other in months. It was just like, it was just as if we had seen each other, the day before. We'd just pick up where we'd left off. It was that kind of a strong bond and friendship.
Magnificent. Dr. Castaneda, a few minutes ago, I had mentioned how my tío Neto and my grandparents, my Solis grandparents, were migrant farm workers, and they worked in the Midwest. And I learned from you that my Solis grandparents did not want my father, Rene, to pick crops. Can you tell us more about that, please?
He mentioned that Neto had been doing farm work, and he wanted to do that during the summer, but his parents said no. His parents said just no, and he didn't challenge it. He told me that he wanted to do it, but then he started working at Richters. He worked in the shoe department, and that's how he spent his summers. And then I asked him, what about Neto? They told you no. What about Rene? No, dijo, they said no. Well, you both no. So I don't know if Neto did it on his own or against their wishes, and I'm thinking that's why they were so adamant with Joe and with Renee.
As we discuss the early years of my father and your early years here in Laredo in this first segment that we're doing together, what other memories come to mind that maybe something happened that may have influenced your lives? Was there any like an incident that happened where you're like, boy, all these years later we have this in common? And maybe it was a school experience or a work experience. Anything come to mind about those early years? No.
It was our time together was mainly. It was not cerebral. It was mainly what can I say? Playing, going out. We used to go to this restaurant on San Bernardo. They had the jukebox. We played, and we just sat there and drank sodas and talked about school and girls and stuff like that. But no, nothing. And we all knew we were going to college. We all knew, in fact, in high school, we knew what we wanted to study and we knew what we wanted to be. So it was not like I see some of my kids now. What are you going to study? Well, I don't know. Maybe business. Maybe this. Maybe that. No, but we knew exactly what we were going to do.
It's my understanding my father didn't know he was a valedictorian until the day before it was announced.
I think he knew. Okay. He just didn't want to announce it. We knew. And in fact, I remember we went to take a national scholarship test back then. ¿Te acuerdas? There was a national test that we would score. And they had the announcement that Joe was in the top 10. And we had another Robert Hance, that was also in the top 10. And nationally. So I don't know what top 10 meant, if it was first or 10 or 5 or whatever. But, he never lorded it over anybody. He a nice guy.
Outstanding. Mrs. Castaneda, this series that I'm creating, the Jose Luis Solis Memorial Channel, it's about the life and times of my father. And my question to you is, what can future generations and our current generation learn about our culture, our community from these humble beginnings? What lessons are there for them?
I think from our family, the Garcias, and I think it was the Solises as well, and I could tell from the way your father, what kind of a man, what kind of a person he became, what kind of a father and grandfather he became. We were taught to obey our parents. We were taught to respect them. We were taught that nothing was for free. That you had to work for whatever you wanted. And it also that your word was gold. That was something that was instilled in me by my grandfather, Don Perfecto Martinez. But back then, and I think that you will find some of these things that the other gentleman that you interviewed,
Mr. Ramon?
Mr. Ramon mentioned as well. When he heard that whistle, he knew he better get home for dinner, and it's like, you got called, you better come, Yes, I mean, we had our little slides here and there, but to respect each other, to love each other, to always support family. It was God, and it was family, and it was a matter of giving and helping other people if we could. Not to be boastful of what we had, but to share if we had whatever we had, to share, whether it was inviting somebody over to eat at our dinner table, with the rest of my brothers and sisters, if there were friends around, or if it was me helping a friend with a homework. it was always a sharing. And the other thing that I'd like to say is that it was instilled in us, at least in my household, and maybe Pete's, he can speak to that, to be bilingual. I grew up learning both languages at the same time. I don't think that was Pete's experience, but it was mine. And I'm very sad to say that a lot of our children, grandchildren, have not followed that route. And I think it's up to us, the adults, to try to instill in our children and our grandchildren the great need that we have to preserve our language, because we have a lot of beautiful emotions, a lot of beautiful experiences, a lot of beautiful truths that are conveyed through our language. Now, we have them in English as well. I am not belittling that, but I think it's very important that we open ourselves to both cultures, and language is one of the ways to do it. So I would say that also it was instilled in us to study hard and to achieve and be better than what we were. Mom and Dad says, we're going to give you as much as we can, but the rest is up to you. And yeah, I always knew that I was going to go to college. There was no question about it. My mother was a college graduate. My dad was not. And she was a teacher as well. And I became a teacher. But those were the values that were instilled in us, and to have a strong faith in God.
Beautiful. Dr. Castaneda, earlier today when I was visiting with my godmother, Tia Carmen Solis, she told me how all of the Solis siblings would sleep on the floor right next to each other, and they would often want to lift the window, but the creak smelled so bad they would close it. My question is, how did that humble beginning influence my father, and how did you see it play out over the years, if you did see it?
It didn't bother him at all. Did not bother him at all. Most of us, or the other three of us, were more fortunate in having a nicer household, parents working in different jobs than Joe did. My father was a construction manager. Raul's father also was construction. And Joe never complained. He never complained. We knew because he was at 109.5 private, and we knew the house. We from the outside, whatever we knew, and we knew how many people were in there. But he never complained. He never complained. He never said, "Gee, I wish I was like you guys," or "Gee, I wish I had a bigger room. I wish I had my own bed." Never complained. Never heard a complaint.
And that's
when he came back from college, when he came back to Laredo, he also worked in construction. He had a construction company, and he did jobs. In our house, we used to own the house next door. He built a brick wall, and then he built our driveway also.
A semicircular driveway, yes.
Our
He
circular
built it
driveway.
for us.
And he did a lot of other jobs in Laredo. And besides working at supervisor of director's department store at the mall.
This was after his engineering.
Yeah, after he came back.
Okay. It was after. There wasn't anything that he couldn't do. Business, construction, his engineering, his aeronautical engineering, and aerospace, excuse me. And but there was anything that he knew so much about everything. And wasn't afraid to try, but was always successful, it seemed.
one final question for the two of you for this first segment, having to do with the early years of my father and your early years also here in Laredo, and that is, what are the earliest or maybe unique stories about my father and my mother being together? Anything come to mind in terms of like, oh, here's a story that people would like?
I remember them as loving each other very much. I was very close to your mom. I still am.
Yeah.
Even though we don't see each other often. And she was always very talkative, platicadora, the beautiful way that she had of expressing herself. And your dad, of course, was just there, listening. He'd interject every once in a while, but I knew he was in tune with what we were, we were saying, or what conversations were going across the table. But I remember them as respecting each other and loving each other very much, and being true friends.
Well, after college, we were actually away for 10 years during my medical school, during my residency. So we were not in touch for those 10 years. We used to go through summer for medical school and everything, so I didn't have any time at all.
And we lived in Monterrey.
And in my last year at
So
medical
we weren't even in the country.
my last year at medical school, she came back to Laredo, and then after that we went to Corpus to do my pediatric residency. So we were away for 10 years. We didn't keep in touch with anybody for 10 years.
But we came back, and it was like we.
After that, yeah, we picked up again. Yeah, like it had been yesterday.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for talking to me in this first segment about early Laredo, Martin High School, and everything else. And thank you for taking me around town this afternoon to Arizona Circle, where we used to live, and Carlton Road, and so forth. So we will have more conversations, God willing.
Yes.
And I want to be able to share with not only my children, but future generations, and also your children too, to understand
Yes.
where we're from. And I guess that leads to my maybe one more question, which is, if there's one single thing that you would want your children to know about your early years in Laredo, what would that be?
I would say first our friendship with my friends, with Joe, Raul, and Ivan. It was a very intense friendship, and also my courtship of Lupita. Those are the two main things.
Nice.
What is it that what would be most significant? I think again, meeting my soulmate. Again, thank you, Joe.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. And we'll be in contact. Thank you.
Thank you.